I'm Katy. Despite the growing pressure for a vote on the Jeffrey Epstein files, or perhaps because of that growing pressure, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson is ending the work week early and sending the House on its summer break. He says President Trump needs, quote, space to figure out how to proceed, and that the real problem on Epstein is the Democrats.
What we refuse to do is participate in another one of the Democrats' political games. This is a serious matter. We are not going to let them use this as a political battering ram. They sat on everything Epstein-related for 4 long years while President Biden was in office.
It was only last week, by the way, that the speaker himself was asking for the files to be released before he backtracked and got in line with Donald Trump. But his conference isn't exactly getting in line. Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky and chair of House Oversight, directed Republican Tim Burchett to introduce a motion to subpoena Ghislaine Maxwell to testify, quote, as expeditiously as possible. Maxwell is in prison serving a 20-year sentence for her role in the Epstein sex trafficking case. Comer says he hasn't spoken with the president, telling reporters, quote, I know that President Trump has said he's going to release all the information they have, but we have members that want to go a little bit further, be a little bit more aggressive. That would include Republicans like Tom Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as Democrat Jim McGovern.
I think momentum will build for transparency. I don't think this is going to go away. And I think when we return in September, we'll get phase 2 of the Epstein files.
This is a serious issue. The highest volume of calls into my office have been about Epstein. People want the information. They don't want things covered up.
They're all scared over these Epstein files, and they're afraid there'll be more votes, and we will have more votes in the Rules Committee.
And joining us now, NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, and Puck's chief Washington correspondent, familiar face around here, Leanne Caldwell. Tom, one thing I left out of that just now was the news about Todd Blanche visiting Ghislaine Maxwell in prison. What is he doing there?
Right. So this is something that's going to be set up, according to a statement not only from the Deputy Attorney General, but also from Maxwell's own attorneys, who acknowledged that this contact has occurred and that it appears that initially they're going to have a discussion, just Blanche and the attorneys, and then from there they're going to have a discussion, Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell. What they're going to get out of that, I'm not so sure. I mean, Epstein's been dead for almost 6 years now. The anniversary of his death is coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then as far as Maxwell, you know, we had a trial, and I was in the hearing when Maxwell, the topic of a plea agreement came up. The judge asked the prosecution, said, has there been a plea offer in this case? They said no, and they said, in fact, neither has Maxwell requested one. So there was an opportunity there. I mean, if she had requested one, if she had other information. But I think at the time, as we reported at the time, Katy, there was not really a compelling case for cooperation because investigators believed that they had maxed out all other avenues as far as additional prosecutions, and that there was nothing really there for her to offer prosecutors in terms of cooperation. But I got to say something. We've seen tweets and statements and posts about going to visit Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, in front of my name, it doesn't say detective. It doesn't say special agent. But I've been doing this job long enough, focused on law enforcement, to know that when you have victims, one of the things that you might do if you're going to go back and look at a case is to go back and speak to the victims. We have not heard about that. We've seen no statement about that from the Justice Department. And our colleague, Laura Strickler, just in the past hour, reached one of the attorneys for about 20 of the victims in the Epstein case, says they've never been contacted by anybody in federal law enforcement over the course of the last several months pertaining to this review. So it's really difficult for me to understand what is it exactly that Maxwell is going to offer that a group of victims who have, according to civil testimony, according to the testimony in federal court that convicted Maxwell, have testified credibly about what they say happened in the course of the years with Epstein and Maxwell. Why not go back and speak to them if you're going to try to see if there's anything
Maxwell
to advance in the case?
had something to offer for a plea agreement. Say she had knowledge of interactions that other powerful people had, or wrongdoing that other powerful people committed. Wouldn't she offer that as part of a plea deal?
Exactly. I mean,
what is the conspiracy that she didn't because she was worried about her own safety? These are very, very powerful people.
I mean, at that point, if she had said, look, I did this sex trafficking, purely as a hypothetical, I was involved in this whole thing. But what you guys aren't focusing on is high-profile person A, high-profile person B, high-profile person C, then that clearly would have been of interest for investigators, and that might have been worth a discussion. But that never happened. We've never heard about it in her filings. Her attorneys have never represented that. So where was this discussion before?
Yeah, it makes you wonder what they're going to come out with after this conversation, if anything.
But the thing is, though, Katie, on the victims, why not reach out to the victims? At the very least, tell them, here are the steps that we're going to do for you if there is another avenue for justice. That's the Justice Department's job. That's the very reason we got into this in the first place. There were a number of victims that sued the Justice Department saying you violated our rights as crime victims in this plea agreement.
So
the reason why we're here in the first
is what's
place.
happening right now, this idea that Maxwell is somehow the victim? Is she being painted as a victim in some circles? I'm having a hard time following the conspiracy and who's arguing what lately.
Well, I have a hard time following it, too, and I've covered this case for only about 10 years. So I'm not sure exactly what the thought process is. What I am sure about is there doesn't seem to be any indication publicly and from our discussion with at least one attorney of anybody picking up the phone and calling and caring about the victims in this case who have obviously been let down by the Justice Department in the past.
The ones who were taken advantage of and violated. All right, Ryan, let me ask you about Congress. What happened? Why is the Speaker sending everybody home early for their summer break?
Well, the biggest reason is, Katie, because he does not have unanimity within his own conference as to how to push forward as it relates to the revealing of information in this controversy. House Speaker Mike Johnson told us today, Leanne and I were both in the room when this happened, that there's no daylight between him and President Trump when it comes to what he described as transparency in this case, and he blamed Democrats for being the obstructionists in this. But that really flies in the face of the facts that it is Republicans that control the Rules Committee. They have a 9-4 advantage on the Rules Committee. If they wanted to dispatch or get rid of any amendment having to do with Jeffrey Epstein, they could do so. The reason they can't do it is because there are rank and file members of the House Republican Conference who do not believe the Trump administration has gone far enough in revealing information as it relates to this case. And you see the House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer echoing that sentiment. So the House Speaker can try and push this off. He can claim that it's Democrats that are responsible for all of it, but it's his own party that he has a problem with here. And if this was something that Republicans were completely unified on, he could bring a bill to the floor. They have the majority of the votes. They could either motion to table it or get it out of the way and not talk about it. He simply does not have that ability right now, which is why he's basically putting up the out of office sign on the House chamber doors and saying, we're going on our recess so that we don't have to talk about this for a month. The question is, what's going to happen when they come back? You heard Marjorie Taylor Greene say that this is the #1 constituent call issue that she's dealing with in her ruby red district. Is that what it's going to be like when they go back and talk to their constituents in these towns across the country? Are they going to get an earful from their voters because they're not doing enough on this? I think Republicans have tried to bury their heads in the sand for quite some time since the DOJ released that initial memo saying there's nothing to see here. It's clear it is their base that is upset about this.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that Democrats are trying to exacerbate that. I'm not going to deny that in any way, shape, or form. Democrats are picking at a scab for sure, but the problem exists within the Republican conference.
Yeah, Leanne, you saw that. You saw Thomas Massie holding up that binder. You know, if you build it, they will come. If you have the binder, you will get the information. How pervasive is the issue of Epstein? Is it just a Washington thing? Is it just Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie demanding this? Or is it that Marjorie Taylor Greene is right, that this is the #1 call from her constituents, and that other lawmakers are feeling that as well, that the base, their voters, are the ones that are loudly demanding this?
Yeah, it's a question I keep asking these members because I'm trying to figure out the same thing, Katie. And when I talked to Marjorie Taylor Greene today, she said that this will absolutely be a political issue for Republicans, too, in the 2026 midterm elections. And she believes because so many of Republican-based voters care about this way too much if this is not handled correctly. And part of the reason, or a big reason, the House Rules Committee was so stuck, as Ryan mentioned, because Republicans did not want to vote over and over again against releasing this information. They didn't want to vote for a Democratic amendment, but they also didn't want to vote against releasing the information because they, I'm told, are being hammered by their constituents at home too. And not all of those Rules Committee members are from really, really conservative districts. There's some more moderate members on there. And so this does seem to be an issue that is not going away. Remember, part of the MAGA coalition was built in large part because Trump is a truth teller. He was the one who was going to break the deep state. And Republicans signed on to that and agreed with them and got behind him on that. And so now their constituents are expecting them to act.
Yeah. And he installed a bunch of folks who were not a part of the deep state, notably saying that these are the people that report to me and me alone. They're not established, institutionalized individuals like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, et cetera. He purposefully chose people who were loyal to him. Vaughn Hilliard, how much is this rattling the White House?
Well, the president suggested from the Oval Office that he wasn't aware that the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General were going to go forward with this Ghislaine Maxwell meeting or seek to have a discussion with her, which I think is notable if you take the president's word in this here. He is effectively called this a witch hunt, as he did during that exact same Oval Office meeting. It's not clear what part of this all he's referring to as a witch hunt, because we know that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were both found guilty of sex trafficking and assault charges. And if you go back to 2020, it was the Department of Justice under his first Trump administration that brought that first indictment against Ghislaine Maxwell and ultimately was effectively able to prosecute her and sentence her to 20 years in prison. She, if she were to get out after 20 years, would be 80 years old here. And folks will recall back in 2020, shortly after that indictment was handed down against Ghislaine Maxwell, the then president was asked about it, and he wished her well and noted that he had met her numerous times, especially because of their shared Palm Beach residences. And I think if you look at this a step further, also the potential conflict of interest that Todd Blanche, his former defense attorney up until a couple months ago and becoming the #2 at the Department of Justice, is the one who is going to be having conversations potentially with Ghislaine Maxwell. And the president was asked specifically whether he had concerns about the dynamic of that relationship, and he said no. He called his former personal defense attorney a smart man there. But I think this really hits at the heart of the conflict of interest question, and one that, you know, we learned a lot from the extensive reporting that Tom did at the time of her trial. One of those tidbits that came out about Donald Trump were those flight logs showing that he went on 7 different flights, according to the flight records from Ghislaine Maxwell. And so I think that there's a lot of questions here, and it's notable that the man who is leading this discussion is somebody who is defending the very man who is named in the Epstein files here at the same time.
Yeah, and again, a lot of this is already in the public record, including some of those flight logs, as Vaughn just mentioned. What was interesting is when Donald Trump said he was going to release more information, Tom, he ordered his Department of Justice, the AG, to release grand jury testimony, what they could. That was interesting because they don't have the authority to just unilaterally release grand jury testimony. They've got to go to a judge for that. And today the judge ruled on it and unsurprisingly said,
has more questions, and that's specific to the Maxwell case. So they did 2 things. One, they asked the docket and the judge overseeing the case involving Jeffrey Epstein, can we release these grand jury transcripts? We would like you to release them. And the Justice Department also asked the same of the judge presiding over the Maxwell trial, the initial trial, the district court judge, for the same thing. That district court judge in the Maxwell trial said, look, I need some more information about why you want to do this, how you want to do this. Give me some more details here. I want you to file under seal the exact transcripts, what your proposed redactions are to them. I want to be able to look at that as well. And then also want to give the Maxwell side an opportunity to comment. There is case precedent to release grand jury testimony when it's in the public's interest. In this particular district has had some precedent on this, so it's not absolute. I think there's some folks who said, no, that can never be released. That's not quite true. It can be released it's probably more in the favor of the Epstein case because he's deceased, and given the volume of interest into him, it's more likely we'll see it there. But Katy, so the leak investigators don't get all excited, I have not seen the grand jury transcripts, but I can probably pretty much tell you what's in them because that's the testimony that goes into the indictment. And we have both indictments in this case. So you would know what people generally said to be able to get the grand jury to vote on it.
It's also something that's easy to blame on a judge. Well, we tried to release it, but this judge told us no. This judge demanded certain redactions. And I wonder, Ryan, is that going to be enough for people who are demanding transparency? If this judge comes out and says no, and they try to blame the judge, do the doubters, the demanders then align themselves with Donald Trump and get angry at the judge the way that they believe that they would get angry at the quote-unquote fake news, like the Wall Street Journal for reporting on Donald Trump's alleged body letter to Jeffrey Epstein? Do they believe that they can find a different enemy that they can all get behind Donald Trump to disavow?
I think that's the goal by the Trump White House right now. And I do think that there's probably a faction of his supporters that are just looking for something to paper this over so that they can then move on to the next thing. But if that were the case, if it were enough that he was just going to get these grand jury transcripts, I think that you would have seen kind of the fervor that exists right now in the base of the House Republican caucus, at least on the House side, start to calm down. And if anything, it's gotten more pitched. I mean, you're seeing them be a bit more aggressive in their language as it relates to it. You know, you have seen some House Republicans applaud him for taking this step, but there are very few amongst the crowd of folks who are very insistent that this information come out, that believe the grand jury transcripts alone will be enough to answer all the questions that they have about the Epstein drama. And this is in part kind of the box that Donald Trump has kind of found himself in that there may not be any there, which Tom Winter has very eloquently stated. But when you're dealing with a conspiracy theory and people that fervently believe a conspiracy theory, you need to give them something. And so he's in a position here where there could be damaging information about him or people that he's associated with that he doesn't want to get out there that may not be criminal but just doesn't look good. But then on the other hand, there just may not be anything there, and there is literally no way to satisfy them. So it's a very difficult position that the president finds himself in.
Even if you end up releasing information, that might not satisfy folks.
Exactly.